Right, super itchy around the eyes for some reason. I don't know why.
Gonorrhea.
What?
It's the
He
eye.
is doing. He is doing the woman
Yeah.
next door's grandma.
It's the eye herpes.
Yeah. Well, you haven't seen the woman next door's grandma. She's hot as hell, man.
Yeah.
All right. So, welcome everyone to this week's edition of the Petty and Ill-Informed podcast, where we put our petty and ill-informed opinion onto various topics for our own amusement. Tonight, we will be discussing the mystery of Jack the Ripper. Boom, boom, boom. Joining me on this quest of discovery, Nikki and Kevin. Hello, guys.
Hey,
Hello, everyone. How's it going? I like the fact that you're not saying where we're at now. We're in a location underneath the grind. We're secret.
Yes.
It's our secret base. Well, we have to be in a secret base today because I did notice. I have a petty comment to make, really quick, and some people will say it borders on the political, but I don't think it does because it's so petty of a comment. No, but listen.
Okay. Yes, I know what you're going to say. Just say it.
What? No, it's about. No, listen. It. You know, if you're gonna type in tyranny, make sure that it's not auto-correcting to tranny, because there's lots of my friends on Facebook right now who are standing up to tranny.
Resist tranny at all times. Tranny is not the way our government needs to operate.
No. Make sure. And so that was my petty comment of the afternoon. It takes.
learn to spell. Learn to spell is your petty comment.
Well,
I've been saying that for years.
yeah. Well, I'm just saying it sort of it changes the message.
It absolutely does. Yeah.
Nikki is what you'd call a grammar Nazi.
Oh, well, she would hate me.
Or a grammar
Oh no,
tranny.
trust me. Sometimes your posts make my eye twitch.
Oh
Like,
no, yeah, no, I'm
I'm
terrible.
like, oh, it's autocomplete, and he can't see very well. It's okay. It's okay, Nikki. Don't
Yeah.
say anything.
Well, there's somebody. So I think last week Richard, had to mute himself because he was like sneezing. He was having an allergy attack, and I was trying to read something in the comments, and I sounded like I, was like a second, second grader, trying to read it out, and I it's the combination of dyslexia and being blind in one eye, and it really. It really does make me sound like an illiterate sometimes. So that's just the way it is. And I understand that, but that's good.
I'm pinning that comment, Jake Lavelle. That
What
was
does it say?
awesome. It's pinned to the chat. If you can't spell, use autocorrect.
That's right. Otto von correct.
But he misspelled all the words on purpose.
Yeah, I got it. I blew it up. I blew it up there in the end. I suppose I shouldn't say it that way.
No.
You don't want to have an Irish guy saying I blew it up in the end.
Well, times be changing, Kevin.
Yes, times they are a changing.
So, you said something on Facebook that I think should be repeated. You said it earlier. I knew we said we weren't going to talk about it, but I think it needs to be said. So,
what about 9/11?
Yeah, just.
Well, I mean,
it's a fair point.
I mean, I am an American, and I will say that I think it has to do with the rise of all these different things. But I was saying that whenever I talk to my grandparents, the attack of Pearl Harbor was a watershed event where everybody felt like they were an American. You know what I mean? And for me, I kind of think that 9/11 was the last time I remember everybody being quote unquote an American. And what I mean by that, not by nationality, but by action, where everybody wasn't hating the half. And I don't know. I mean, the thing about it is it was a tragedy and everything like that, but I wonder if anything like that happened again, whether we would have that sort of 1 or 2 days of unity that we had back then, because it doesn't seem like we do. You know, pandemic doesn't do it. Sandy Hook doesn't do it. You know, hurricanes don't do it. Everything is some kind of a weird thing. But at that one point in time, we were attacked from the outside, and everybody was an American and was in each other's hearts for at least a day and a half.
And that's a nice sentiment.
Unless they had brown skin, and then everybody was afraid of them.
Well, yeah, but I don't think that happened right away. I don't think that happened right away. Obviously, with all things did change. I mean, I was 30 at the time. I just remember, I worked with a guy who was Moroccan, and I was afraid because of the fact that it was known. It was known that they were, from Muslim people, and I worked with a Moroccan who was Muslim, and I was very afraid that he would get shit because I worked in a small farming valley, and no, it wasn't like that at all. I mean, at least at the start, you know what I mean? At least at the start. So 2-3 weeks into it, yeah, it was a totally different story. But at the start of it, it wasn't like that. Yeah, I was just trying to think of what events and different people's. Like I said to Richard, I think the death of Princess Diana brought Britain together for a day or two until they started fighting with each other about it. And I kind of wonder if, with the rise of social media, whether we could do that ever again. And that's what I mean. Is there would be somebody making a live stream comment about it at the time with a weird theory, and we all talk about weird theories, but
Alan Hentages makes a good point. After all these years, you'd think a pandemic would bring us together. You'd be wrong if you knew your history, because this exact same thing with the anti-maskers and it's all a load of crap happened during the Spanish flu epidemic as well. So
yeah, you can find a lot of anti-mask stuff, and the funny part about it back then was that was a very large thing in San Francisco. San Francisco was kind of the epicenter of the anti-masker group back then, and everybody had sort of a localized approach to it. I mean, there was a town in Colorado that basically just cut itself off from the rest of the world for about a year, and they saved a ton of lives by quarantining themselves.
I think New Zealand did the same thing at the start of this pandemic, and
yeah, and that was it. You couldn't get in or out, and that was it. They stopped you around there, stopped your freedom of movement, and that worked. I mean, could you imagine stopping freedom of movement at this point in time? In America, and doing that, I just it's a tough one. It's a tough one, but it's. I don't know the answer. I don't know if forcing people to get a vaccine is the answer, and I don't know whatever. But here's the thing: I would like to know whether you have a vaccine or not, just so I can protect them, or they can protect me, or vice versa. That's all I'm saying. It's just that it feels like you're playing Russian roulette.
I think it makes sense for healthcare workers to need the vaccine, because you have to get a bajillion vaccines and tighter tests to make sure that your other vaccines are all up and on the up and up before you can even start working at a hospital. So
right. And I mean, the thing about it
is, to me, it's no different. Like when they sent out an email at my work, which they did, saying you have until January to get vaccinated or you don't have a job.
Right.
I was like, okay, well, I'm already vaccinated, but
right.
It made sense to me. Like, this is a new vaccine. We work in an industry where, it's.
Well, I'm not saying. I mean, I'm fully vaccinated. I've told you why. It's because my wife has a compromised immune system, and she's
Yeah.
vaccinated, and that
It's
it made sense for us. But what I'm saying is
it's absolutely a choice that you can make,
yeah,
but in some aspects, it's you can't be upset at some points of it if you're the partners at where I worked is who decided to um make it mandatory for vaccinations.
mhm,
I can go someplace else, but being in my field of work, I'm going to have to get one no matter where I go.
right.
That's
Well,
just part of my job.
I look at it like this. when I when I traveled abroad for purposes of working for the government, um, I was injected with whatever and wherever, and I have no freaking idea what I was loaded. I mean, they could have been filling me full of your plutonium for all I know,
Yeah.
and you just said that was what I agreed to do, and I did it. And so, I mean, at a certain point in time, I mean, this is the thing. We spend all this worry about time. Worrying about these types of things. But you got to understand, where was the outrage whenever people of my generation came back from the first Gulf War and they were dying of Gulf War disease, which possibly came from the atropine shots that they were giving us for against nerve agents. Who gave a shit then? You know, where were all these freedom lovers back then? And,
Yeah.
and then whenever we had it and my friends started to get sick, where did anybody give a shit?
Yeah.
And so the way I look at it is, yeah, I mean, I know that people will say, okay, well, the first Gulf War didn't have anything to do with the freedom of Americans and everything like that, which, maybe it didn't, and on all that shit. But we were doing a job for certain things, and you know, we were exposed to all kinds of stuff,
Mhm.
depleted uranium bullets and all that different types of thing, and you know, it's like, okay, at a certain point in time, whenever the whole vast majority of people says "f you guys," and whenever you get to the other end of it, it's hard not to look back and say, you know what, "f me, no f you." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just freaking buck up and take it, because that's what we did. But at the same point in time, I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be nice and say, "Well, that makes a difference for a civilian." Civilian didn't sign up for uh, the type of things that we did, but
Right.
but at the same time, and I would be, and here's the thing, and I would be a little bit reticent if I had children who were under a certain age. I
Right.
would be very hesitant about that, because they don't have the agency at that point in time to say yay or nay to it. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's a parental decision, and I have children who are in their 20s and they make their own decision for themselves, and I don't have to do it. And so they did it. I mean, I just basically said, well, if you don't, if either way, you need to act this way in this house if you're going to come over or whatever. But and be careful. But I would prefer it if you were vaccinated. But then they made their own choices about it, and I stand
Yeah.
by that. I
I'm
stand by.
okay with everybody making their choice, but like we said, in some cases, it makes sense to mandate it.
Well, yeah, and the thing about it is, and I wasn't really paying that much attention, but basically, because I look at it from this standpoint. There's nowhere in the Constitution does it say you're guaranteed a job or a lifestyle. You know what I mean? So if you don't want to have a job and you don't want to have a lifestyle, you don't have to take it. You don't have to take the thing. If you give up your job and you give up your house and your mortgage and your car payment and everything like that, you don't have to take it. That's the thing that I'm saying. You do have a choice. The choice is very, very economically disabling for you, but that's nowhere in the Constitution is that guaranteed to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would actually be against American society to guarantee you a job. since you
Right.
follow the capitalist
Right.
mentality,
And,
guaranteeing
yeah.
a job would just go against your entire society.
Right. I
Me
mean,
and the girls at work have been joking about going to work for McDonald's. They have $500 to sign up, and then you get $200 extra a week for the rest of the year.
yeah, but you see, the thing about it is, and a lot of people don't understand this. You're talking about U.S. government and government contractors,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody is a government contractor. I mean, you could be sitting in the middle of Baghdad right now and probably get McDonald's given to you by some contractor spooning out freaking hamburgers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's that's the thing that you have to realize is, we always made that joke. It's like if you get court-martialed out of the U.S. Army or whatever, you can't work for the government or contractors. They can't take you up. You're just normally discharged, and yeah, that means you can't even work for McDonald's or Burger King. They're government contractors. So, don't get dishonorably discharged.
Wow.
And and that's the thing is, I can't tell you what to do, but and this is a different thing. We're not in the age of self-sufficiency anymore. I mean, at the time of 100 years ago, where somebody owned a piece of land and they could grow it, and they owned their property, and they owned this, and they didn't have a mortgage, and everything that you owned, you got, and you were living on that sort of that hand to mouth existence. Um,
No, Mr. Hentages, the shots are not mandatory.
Yeah.
But they're trying to make them mandatory. I've had mine, so I don't care now.
Do you think that you think that they will? Because I said to somebody, maybe they should move to the Republic of Ireland, because it seems to me like that's the most free place in the world anymore. Sadly.
Well, they work pretty hard to secure that freedom.
Wow.
Fought England for 300 years to get half their country back.
Wow.
Richard and I were talking before the show about the Irish people and their misplaced sense of self-importance in the world, but I'm still going to go straight for it. We're a nation of if you added everybody together, 6 million people, north and south, 3 million in the 3.5 million in the south, 1.5 in the north.
See you, Mr. Cooper.
So, did I piss him off?
No. Anyway, that seems like a good Kevin segue, though.
Yeah. You know who else?
Speaking of vaccinations, McDonald's, or not McDonald's, sorry, Jack the Ripper.
Well,
I'm all reading McDonald's
Christ,
stuff.
Niki.
No, I will say this. Several of the victims of Jack the Ripper were from Ireland.
Were McDonald's employees.
Yes.
You guys didn't read that. It's true.
Yeah. And so, in the end, obviously.
So, you've done a lot of research, Kevin. Niki, I assume you did no research.
Absolutely none.
Yeah, figured. How many?
I've been busy.
How many victims are there, do you think?
How many victims do you think they are of Jack the Ripper?
I would say 8, possibly 9.
8 or 9.
8 or 9, based on the fact that there seemed to be a couple of different victims who were not as mutilated. But according to the FBI experts who work on these cold case things or whatever, 8 or 9 could be considered. They don't think that the first maybe 3 or 4 were related, but I don't know how you could do. I mean, the thing that I find from doing all this is a lot of the evidence that people throw up and try to say things are going they're using not necessarily police reports, they're using newspaper articles. And I think we talked about that last week, Richard, that these were salacious articles, and sometimes whenever they figured out some different information, they would print retractions, but the retractions would almost be, almost like this, well, the article that we had posted may be an error, but it wasn't wholly without merit. That was a retraction. So that you don't know
Hold that thought for a minute, Kev. Shout out to Cabby's cousin, who was brutally attacked by, Wario is the best way of describing him. She is paralyzed and on her right side and has a long recovery ahead of her. Gabby was there for the trial of this dirtbag, and he looks like Wario. That's it.
So some psychopath basically just sort of went nuts? And,
No. Well, I don't think he's intelligent enough to be a psychopath.
Oh, so he's just a brutal sort of... So it's like a revenge, totally strange.
I think he just looked in the mirror and was angry at the world for the way that he looked, personally. But
all the best, and hopefully...
But yeah, shout out to Gabby's method. Shout out to Gabby's cousin and to Gabby, who is a kind, sweet person looking after her cousin in this time of great horribleness for her. Yeah, struggle.
Yeah,
That's the word.
and the thing I'll say about that is, if look after yourself. I mean, I know that in a lot of cases that people who look after a chronically ill person, the institute, and nobody ever talks about this, but it's a well-known fact that the amount of depressive thoughts, depression, and sort of hopelessness and everything like that carers of chronically ill people feel is very real. It's very real, and it's very common, more common than not, but people don't ever talk about that. And so it's very important that you take a moment for yourself to try to make yourself, give yourself a break. And if you can't, obviously speak to somebody about some long-term antidepressants or something like that, because it can be as debilitating for the person looking after the person who's chronically ill as it is the chronically ill person. So that's all I want to say about that. But
yeah, I would have brought it up sooner, Gabby, but I didn't know if you wanted to talk about it on the show. But you said it in the chat, so I assume that you wanted.
Yeah,
people to
and
talk
I'm not trying to step on anybody's toe. I'm just trying to give you a hand of kindness for somebody who doesn't really know you. But it's something to take into effect if you are caring for somebody who's a long-term chronically ill person. Look after yourself.
Absolutely. And okay, sorry.
So what I was going to say was, again, so it's very hard to figure out exactly a lot of these different things and tracks and trying to narrow it down. It's almost impossible, in my opinion, to figure out how many people there were and the reasons why people were, giving evidence. It sounds to me like there was several people around some of the deaths that were seeming to be interested parties in some of these women, especially the last victim, and Mrs. Kelly or Miss Kelly.
The last official victim.
The last official victim. I mean, there was a guy named Hutchinson who basically, gave the most intense description I've ever heard. You know what I mean? Down to like what he was wearing, the length of the chain, this, that, his mustache. I mean, he would have had to have been like right next to the guy. But, so what happened is that when she goes out and asks, because a lot of these women were basically forced because of the DOS house situation that they were living in, they had to pay their sort of rent every night. And so a lot of times, because of the fact that they were alcoholics, they would go out, get a few tricks, then go down, drink their drinks in the pub or whatever, and then basically come back penniless, and then have to go out at night to try to, get their rent money for the night. And that sounds like, to me, what happened in most of the cases, that the last people who had seen them going out at, very late. And I mean, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I think Mary Kelly was killed about 4 o'clock in the morning. If you listen to some of the evidence that they had, which was that so the person who lived upstairs from her and the person who lived next door to her both had heard somebody screaming, "Oh my God!"
At different
murder.
times. Yeah.
Yeah, murder. And that wasn't that wasn't enough to. They thought no more about it and went back to sleep. That was the strange thing about it is that they heard it and they thought, well, this is a rough part of town. And I guess that wasn't uncommon to hear people screaming. But I mean, I don't know how you would have known that a crime was being committed. But anyway, so this guy Hutchinson, I think, had a secret sort of stalking relationship with Mary Kelly, because
he might have been the Ripper himself.
Yeah, because he gave this very, very vivid description of this sort of person carrying these different items and everything like that. But he was, standing outside the alcove of the walkway for 3/4 of an hour, 45 minutes, sort of watching who was going in and out with her. So it sounds to me like some kind of a weird creeper. Like he's basically trying to, I mean, it doesn't seem to me like there was. I mean, obviously she had a relationship with another man who had lost his job, and so therefore she had to return to the streets to do different things. And I mean, and that was just the way it was. But obviously, the main person that they feel, according to these datas and everything like that, is this Kosminski.
Whoa. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the reason I brought up the number of victims was because that is obviously hotly debated. Now, officially, there's five victims of the Ripper: Mary Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Kelly. Those are the 5 official, but even that number is hotly debated. Some people think that Mary Kelly wasn't a Ripper victim because she was killed at home. Some people think that it's more than 5. Some people put it as high as 15. London was a terrible place to live when this was happening. There were lots of murders. And, he sent letters to the police and claimed credit for at least 3 of them. So, but officially there's 5 victims. The canonical 5, they're referred to as. And some people say it's more, some people say it's less.
Mm-hmm.
Various reasons. Now, serial killers do evolve. The first few kills are usually a lot more sloppy than the eventual kills. So it's entirely possible that there were a few more kills before, what's her face? Mary Nichols.
Yeah.
But I don't personally think that Mary Kelly was a Ripper victim, simply because serial killers do evolve. They get a lot more refined in the way they do it, and Mary Kelly was savagely ripped apart. whoever killed her was very, very angry at her because he literally tore. There's pictures of it on the internet, and it makes me gag.
Yeah, there was really not a piece of flesh left on her body, and he had removed her breasts and placed it one at her feet, one at her head. There were chunks of the inside of her legs on the table. They had burned her clothing, and she was basically, like eviscerated.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's why I don't think Mary Kelly was a Ripper victim.
yeah. So obviously that the thing that is interesting that a lot of people think that the only piece of actual Jack the Ripper um, evidence that was actually written by Jack the Ripper was the um, was the one sent to George Lusk,
Yeah.
who was he was in charge of the sort of Whitechapel sort of vigilante squad. I know they weren't called that, but it was something like that. And that was the one that had a piece of uh, of of actually human kidney in it, and so they had taken it down to uh, get that looked at by two people who said, two medical. And now the people don't realize that the Metropolitan Police, there's two police forces in London at the time: the Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police. The City of London is a square mile, basically in the center of town, around sort of the Tower of London, and a square mile around that area, which butts up against sort of the East End. And I'm surprised you didn't play the EastEnders theme tune for this.
Come on.
Okay, and
It would be a storyline on there. It's worth noting now. It's worth noting that the letters aren't actually. There's no way of saying for sure that the letters came from the Ripper because they were all postmarked well after the murders took place. Well, at least a couple of days after the murders, when all the gossip and all the journalists had widely covered the case, and there was nothing in them that 100% wasn't public knowledge.
Right.
And yeah, there was one who sent a piece of kidney, but how hard was it to get a kidney in those days?
Yeah. Well, I think that was the one that a lot of people think is the only genuine one, and the sort of the Dear Boss letter was definitely a fake made up by somebody who worked at the newspaper, maybe even the editor in chief himself. So I mean, and that's the thing that was true, was that they were, a lot of people were making hay out of it. Like I said, London was a violent place. I think to have 5 murders in London over the course of 3 months
wasn't that unusual.
No, what happened all the time. But the thing,
Jake Lavelle there. What about Mary Kelly was killed indoors so that the Ripper could fully do what he couldn't do to the 4 he killed outside? That is another reason I don't think Mary Kelly was a Ripper victim. Serial killers are very loyal to their methods. They don't deviate. The fact that she was killed inside also points to the fact that she had nothing to do with the other 4.
Yeah, and I think that it is interesting to say that and we sort of talked about this before, about sort of anti-Jewish sentiment that was sort of going on in Europe around this time, and proceeded on to the Second World War. I mean, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of these folks sort of had a lot of the idea that Jack the Ripper was a Jewish man. You've got to understand that this is the time of sort of anarchists and socialists and everything like that, a lot of people who were running sweatshops in the East End were known as, which were known as, they were actually called sweaters, were were Jewish folks, and so therefore, there was a lot of anti-Jewish sentiment. There was a lot of anti-Irish sentiment at that time too. You wouldn't want to have been Irish or Jewish, you know, in London at the time. And it was interesting that the way that even the person who wrote some of the books that I was reading was talking about Mary Kelly's sort of de facto partner who had lost his job, but they called him a London-born Irishman. You know what I mean? And that was like one of those things, like you couldn't get, even though you were born in England, you couldn't get the Irish out. You know what I mean? It just,
No.
I mean, that was just one of those things that, even in 2020, I've been to London and sort of, been looked at for being Irish. You know what I mean? And it was a strange thing. So that sort of, that idea of, Irish folks being very sort of almost, and we have that in America too. Irish folks were portrayed as very sort of almost subhuman, Neanderthal people for a long time. But but it is interesting that that's how it was funny to me that and a lot of people don't understand what I'm trying to get at is a lot of people didn't think that an English man could do this kind of violence. You know what I'm saying? That they could not do that kind of violence. So it had to be a foreigner. And so you have to take a Jew or an Irish person or some kind of immigrant to do this because it was not capable for an Englishman to be so brutal to another human being.
Nikki, you're being very quiet.
I was just listening.
So I mean that's part of it, and I think that a lot of that gets thrown into the idea of when we're trying to do these different types of things. I mean, obviously, this sort of skews the evidence that we can look at, and a lot of people look at the letters that said, the Jews are, where
The
they
ones to be blameless, and I won't stop ripping them.
right. And so a lot of people say because he didn't spell Jews the correct way, that this was a reference to the murder of in a Masonic ritual. And when you get the third degree, there's a play that's put on, including 3 people who murder the Freemason, the head of the Temple of Solomon, the chief architect, Hiram Abiff, and their name is Jubilo, and something else. I'm sorry, I can't remember what it is now. But they then thought that the 3 Jews, as in the start of the name, the 3 Jews are not to be blamed. In other words, that it was a Freemason thing. And if you go on to a lot of different things, the movie From Hell basically makes that point, that it was a Freemason hit job on these women because the prince, who was also a Freemason, had gotten Mary Kelly pregnant. And so, no, not Mary Kelly, but a prostitute pregnant. And that these were the 5 women who knew about the pregnancy and knew who the person was who had gotten them pregnant. So basically, they were loose ends that needed to be tied up. So that was the big, and for a long time, that was it. That it was all Freemasons. The doctor of Queen Victoria was a Freemason, and he was the one who was going around carving up these women, and as the head of the superintendent was a Freemason. So that's why when Mary Kelly's body was found, he canceled, because at that point in time they were going to bring in bloodhounds to try to search for the person who had done it, and they were discovered at about 10 o'clock. They by the time the superintendent had gotten there, the the superintendent had called off the bloodhounds, said they weren't coming, and so that was seen as a Freemason's way of covering up for the fact that this bloodhound was supposedly hours after the fact you're not going to be able to track this person. So
Actually, Jake, if you look into the Piltdown Man legacy, it was pretty much Charles Dawson was just a troll, basically. He just enjoyed practical jokes. And that's where the Piltdown Man came from. But yeah, you're probably right that that's why everybody believed it. But he was just a jackass, really. He was just a rich jackass.
With the Piltdown mine, it was interesting because Charles Dawson was not unknown to the archaeological community. I mean, that's the thing that I'll say about that was this wasn't the first thing that he found. He'd found quite a lot of good things, and so he had a a sort of a reputation at that point in time. He was a dentist, and so he was a man of quote unquote learning. And again, you wouldn't have thought that he was going to present that. A lot of people think that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was in on the Piltdown Man thing, and that that he had gone and buried it so that the other guy had could find it.
He zero credibility. The dude believed in fairies. He was insane.
Who, Arthur Conan Doyle?
Yeah, he believed in fairies.
Yeah, but a lot of people believed in fairies then.
Yeah, but he fell for that obvious fairy hoax.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, the problem with that era is, again, you get through the spirituality movement that was going through London at the time. I mean, the world at the time, but especially in England. And so you've got this sort of revival of these old things. I mean, it's like Stonehenge. Nobody paid attention to Stonehenge for thousands of years. It basically was fallen over. Stonehenge, as you see it, is not the way Stonehenge was 100 years ago. And most people don't believe that and don't know that. They basically took the stones of Stonehenge, put them on cranes, lifted them up, put them back in the spot, and made a circle. It was literally not like that 100 years ago. That's a recreation of the way it was as far as they were concerned. During the First World War, the RFC, the Royal Flying Corps, wanted to move it or use it as a bomb location so that they could blow it up. In other words, there were all these different places around that had just basically, Avebury was the same way, all these different things that they couldn't understand how they had gotten there, and that there was a prehistoric people who had lived there. I mean, a lot of people had not even considered the fact that, or knew that much about Britain before Roman times, because Celts didn't write anything down. Although the Druids could write, they believed that most of the sacred informations that they had could not be written down. It had to be orally transpired. That's why we knew very little of it. So therefore, the idea of how these items got there were very, very steeped in folklore traditions of fairies and different things, building them and doing things like that. It's only now that we sort of understand who possibly had built these different group, these areas. It's true of a lot. It's true of a lot of different things, and so I mean, the idea of fairies making these things are not that uncommon, and really transposed itself into the sort of the modern era, especially whenever you're looking at things like, um, uh, you know, the Industrial Revolution. If you really look at it if you go from the agricultural uh, bounty that was English countryside to the age of the Industrial Revolution, and how that made so many people's lives absolutely shit and worthless, then and bleak, you can sort of understand why people were looking to fantasy as a way out. You know what I'm saying? So that people could speak to you from behind. And obviously, uh, Houdini was in on that too. He used to go with Arthur Conan Doyle to try to find anybody who could talk to Houdini's mom, and speak to the other world,
His wife.
yeah, and
No, his wife tried contacting him because they had a code word, didn't they?
right. Yeah, it was that was it. It was supposed to give him a code word. Nobody knew it. No, and so I think it wasn't that Houdini also didn't believe in it. He was just trying to say. I mean, he was so bitter at the point. There's like is as a person who's smoked in his life, you can say there's nothing worse than a guy who quit smoking whenever it comes to treating smokers, and that's exactly what Houdini was. He was a person who wanted to believe and had gotten so bitter at the fact that these people were trying to hoodwink him that he just went freaking all out against them. You know what I mean?
I always liked that about him, that he never went never went down the rabbit hole with all of it. He really wanted to believe, but he wasn't prepared to be hoodwinked about it.
Right. And I think, this is the thing that a lot of people, obviously a lot of people say that about me, but, I wanted in a lot of different cases, you always want to see, you want to believe. And like I said, interesting things about my life. I've seen weird stuff since I was a little kid, but I mean, I don't talk about it. One day, if anybody wants to hear about my stories as a little kid, I'll tell them. But you know, but what I was saying is that you really do want to explain these different things, and you go to different places that people say they can explain it, only to get kicked in the nuts, and you leave with a bad taste in your mouth. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It really does sort of get to the point where, it
Oh, we've gotten way off
yeah, well,
topic.
but you started talking about fairies.
I gave a shout out to the chat about the Piltdown man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All
Anyway,
right.
so instead of talking about the various suspects for Jack the Ripper, I want to talk about my favorite conspiracy theory regarding Jack the Ripper, and this is it. He didn't exist.
Could be.
Yeah, see, I can see I've hooked you guys. All right, 5 people were murdered, right? But they weren't the only 5. As I said at the beginning, there's at least 15 murders that happened in this same 3-month period that are attributed to Jack the Ripper. There was a lot of murders in London, and it's entirely possible that these are just 5 unconnected murders that we, in a flight of whimsy, have turned into a serial killer.
I like that.
Mm. And this is my favorite thing, Jack the Ripper theory, is that he didn't exist and it was just 5 random murders.
I like that, like a lot.
Yeah, there actually that makes the most amount of sense. If you look at it for that, other than the fact that you think that the 2 murders that happened on the same night, the one in Mitre Square and then the one close to it, would you think maybe those 2 could be connected?
It's possible, but, prostitutes work a very dangerous job. And did 2 of them get killed after screwing someone? Not both. I meant figuratively, not literally. Or maybe both. demanded more money or tried robbing them or something, and they got stabbed close by each other. Could be connected. I mean, it's just a theory. Could be wrong, but it's my favorite Jack the Ripper theory.
Well, I think that people don't realize how rough it was, and some of these women had been obviously taking money, maybe from not necessarily a pimp, but because I don't think these women were being sort of quote unquote run in the time, but I think that there was people who would let them have money, short-term money lenders, and
I like how you guys are trying to figure out like what the women did that caused them to get murdered instead of
no,
like
I'm
maybe there were just some really fucked up Johns out there that day.
no, I'm
Yeah,
not.
also possible.
Listen, these women. I'm not saying anything about it. I'm not saying anything about the fact that they were prostitutes or anything. There has been, there was very little work for anybody to do other than prostitution, and I don't think that these folks were doing anything other than trying to provide for themselves in the situation like that. That was just the bad, bad way. I mean, the East End of London was a terrible, terrible slum to live in. I mean,
Right.
to
Still
the
is.
well, yeah. I mean, to the point where it was. I mean, dark. You got. I mean, we've got to understand it. At that point in time, a lot of these places were burning coal. London, even up until I think the 60s, was under this black pall of smoke all the time, and it was just basically this low smog that held over the city, and there was very little light. I mean, some of the roads that these people were on, there was one light at the end of the lane, and I mean, a lot of these people who had found the victims didn't even know if they were women who were just passed out drunk, laying on the ground, whether it was just a bag of clothes, whether it was anything. And it wasn't until they actually got on top of the body that they could even determine that it was, a woman, and not just a bag of rags or something like that. So that, I mean, that's what we're talking about is almost a situation of being in a road that's so dark that we can't even determine what these things are and what it was. And apparently, again, that this was such a rough area to be in, that life was so cheap that, again, I mean, it's astounding to us or me to read that people were screaming murder in the street and nobody even thought to even get up and check and see what was. I mean, if I heard that outside, at least I'd go over to the window and open the drape up and see. I mean, I wouldn't just go, oh, fuck it.
I'm too close to a really
Yeah.
bad part of Memphis, and
Yeah.
it was funny. I had a friend over here from Puerto Rico, and we're both from questionable places. And there was some gunfire around here, like not just a little bit, but like a lot. And we were both just, I wonder if someone's getting shot. Oh well.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I could tell you some fucked up stories from my childhood, but all I could say is, yeah, we used to play bomb bingo in Belfast when I was a kid. And so basically, you'd be rocking up in the city, sitting there having a beer. You'd hear a bomb go off. We would all put down money on what street it was in. Then we'd flip on the radio and hear what road it was on. And the person closest to it would collect the kitty. I mean, so
Wow.
I'm not saying I haven't done fucked up shit.
Right.
So, but I'm just saying that if I heard somebody in the next room or the house in my house saying murder or, whatever, I'd get up and I'd look. There are certain things you can't do about, gunshot. I mean, if, like with a gunshot, you can't even tell a lot of times where it's coming from.
Very true.
And so therefore you're not looking at it from that standpoint. And the last thing you want to do if you don't know where it's coming from is go out in the street
Yep.
and expose yourself to it. So, but that's the thing. We all like to think that we live in a superior world, but you do get jaded towards all these different things, and that, and I think that's something that we do. It's in hindsight, even though both me and you have done that kind of sort of what people would say is gallows humor type of approach to it. These people had to live in that every day, and so maybe that's the way they looked at it. Like I said, life was cheap. Life was
Right.
cheap back then, and so if there's one less prostitute or woman or whatever, who really cares? I guess that was.
They had it coming. Look at what they were wearing.
Yeah. They weren't. I mean, this was not. I think a lot of times people think that they were, like scantily clad. They weren't. I mean,
They were not.
No, this was freezing cold times. You got to understand. I mean, you know what it's like to be out in the middle at 3 o'clock. I mean, imagine being out at 3 o'clock in England.
I've been out at 3 a.m. in Carlisle city centre, and I've just been like, no.
In the rain.
I need like 3 coats. This is too cold. It's stupid.
In the rain, looking for your rent money. You know what I mean? It's
they wore layers. These were not sexy, scantily clad women. These were wearing like 3 or 4 layers. Which, if you think about it, must have made their job even harder. So these hardworking women really deserved more than they got.
Well, I mean,
Niki sticking up for the female.
Oh, thanks for that.
Well,
okay, you can patronize me. That's all right.
no, Niki,
it's patronize.
It's a two-way street, right? You can blame the women, but if there's no demand, it doesn't matter what the supply is. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So therefore,
it's called the world's oldest profession for a good reason.
Right. And so that was the thing, as many a quote unquote civilized man apparently has spent time with prostitutes.
It's like when your friends are all like, I've never looked at porn. Yeah. I don't know who looks at porn. I'm like, yeah, let me check your browser history.
Yeah. Well, no, Jimmy Swaggart, he spent some time with a prostitute.
Yeah, he did.
But he was just trying to save her.
Yeah, he's trying to save her soul.
Yeah, he was trying to save her.
Yep.
But
yeah,
but it was probably her fault.
Yeah, I mean, look at what her soul was wearing.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes you got to pray to women when they're got no clothes on. That's what I'm saying.
I say, oh God, a lot when I'm with naked women. Right.
Yeah. Well.
Wow. That happens to you sometimes?
Oh, snap.
Damn. Woo. I just pray that she's not going to stop me and kick me out. That's all I say.
Anyway, that is my favorite Jack the Ripper theory, that he didn't exist at all.
And I think that's probably very a wise thing to say from that standpoint. He might not have, because with all the other, like I said, with all the background and the interested parties who were really trying to make a meal out of this, it seems very, it seems like almost a machine that was put into motion. And
you've got that, you've got mass hysteria.
Yes.
You've got the gossiping washerwomen. I mean, it's entirely possible this never existed in the first place.
Right.
I do like the theory.
Well, I mean, if you look at the other things where these crimes had started happening, and the people who were, the descriptions are all completely different. I mean, at one point in time, you've got sort of, if you look into the other murders that were maybe associated with it, you've got Leather Apron. You've got a member of,
probably killed one of them.
you've got a member of the Coldstream Guards apparently, and then it turns out that it wasn't the Coldstream Guards; it was the lifeguards, and that were stationed at the different locations and around Buckingham Palace or some of the royal palaces. And then you go from there, and even then you can't identify the people, and then it's a man that looks like a doctor, and then it's a man who is shorter than that and a different thing. It is interesting that nobody had come to the conclusion like that. I don't even think that's a conspiracy theory. I think that's the logical conclusion that none of these things were created. And there was, knife murders in London were not
uncommon.
Yeah. And at that point in time, if you would have thought that these women were being slashed across, because they were slashed across the throat and then mutilated, in the genital area. And that was the one thing that was, used to bring it together, was the sort of the genital mutilation of these crimes. If you were a reasonably smart person and you could, you wanted to slit somebody's throat, and you were a hard man from London, you stick a knife in a private area of a woman to make it look like somebody else did it. As disgusting as that is, there were two women who had been attacked by a gang of people, and had objects inserted into their rectum and vagina, and in that case, and a lot of people thought, well, they gave a description of youths that had done that to her as she was walking home, and they were said, well, this is just a lady who doesn't want to say who the actual perpetrator was or who the customer was, because she didn't want to go to jail for being a prostitute. So
yeah, it's quite a tricky conundrum, and we'll never know for sure now. Too much time has passed, but still, it's fun to dive into Jack the Ripper. Less fun to dive into the history of his Yorkshire cousin, the Yorkshire Ripper.
He was far worse.
He was way worse. Yeah, he killed more people, and you can definitely say with 100% certainty it was him.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, it definitely. But then it is weird that Jack the Ripper is the sort of world's most famous serial killer, and yet basically only just fit the definition. In a way, and so Ted Bundy killed more people.
Ted Bundy's pretty famous, though, to be fair.
Yeah, I understand, but Jeffrey Dahmer, basically, if you look at it from the standpoint of
no, I don't include Jeffrey Dahmer with the other serial killers, okay, because he was a bit odd.
Right, but the only reason that I'm bringing up Jeffrey Dahmer whenever we're talking about serial killers like Jack the Ripper was that Jack the Ripper had claimed that he had cooked and eaten part of the kidney that was sent to George Lusk. That the other half was he had eaten it, and that does come down to a sub compartment or subcategory of serial killers called, I think, lust killers or something like that. And they believe that eating parts of the organs of a victim then gives them more strength or something like that. So
again, no evidence. Just yeah, exactly, Jake. It could have been a sheep's kidney. There's no evidence that letter was connected at all to the crime or the kidney.
Yeah,
it was before DNA, so
right. What two?
Anyway, so has anyone got any ideas for a topic next week? Don't all speak at once.
Well, who are you talking to? Me or you or the group?
Anyone?
The group?
Chat, you, Nikki. I mean,
I thought I had one, but then I thought, I don't know.
this is pretty much the first time all show you haven't said anything, Kevin. So,
I do,
and this is the important bit.
Well-
Mermaids, see, Matt.
mermaids?
What? Why would we talk about mermaids?
Yeah, mermaids actually have a very long and idea of what a mermaid was. Funnily enough, mermaid.
Wait. Let's just go back a second. Mermaids have a long history of knowing what mermaids are.
Yes.
Well, no.
It's like strange wilderness.
Well, no,
Monkeys make up 83% of the monkey population.
yes, I understand. I was just a little blown away by the fact that I don't want to sign like I was taking a. I read a freaking 800-page freaking book this week on Jack the Ripper, and so I'm sorry.
Aww.
I'm sorry I talked about it too much, Richard. You prick.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm finally the one that doesn't have to be mean.
I'm
He
just
found his voice.
No. I'm just saying. I don't. I know that sometimes I get kidded because I talk the whole time, and I don't. I'm not trying to say it. I'm just trying to share what I read and things like that. I would be happy if anybody else talked. I really, really would. I really would, Richard.
Bit difficult with you not giving us a look in.
Well, no. If you have something to say, say it. Say it, please. Why don't you just say "shut up, Kevin"? You used to be able to say that.
I'm just giving you crap, man.
All right, I'm sensitive this week.
Gabby, Bible John, is that serious? Do you want us to talk about the serial killer Bible John? Because you've repeated it like 900 times in the chat.
Is that? Oh, that's not John of God. I was thinking of John of God.
No.
He's a different character.
Gabby wants you to say Bible John.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Bible John?
Ted Bundy, Rod? I don't know. I'm liable to gush. As a fan of serial killers, he's up there for me on his pedestal.
Well, if you want me to, if you want to do Ted Bundy, I can go to the locations around here and take pictures of the parking lot and the houses and all this. I don't live very far away from where that is.
Matt says pharaohs in Egypt. Which pharaohs?
Well, it is hard.
You mean the ones that aren't actually in tombs because pharaohs weren't buried in tombs? You're welcome.
Okay, can I tell you?
Pyramids. Sorry, not tombs. Pyramids.
I had a friend one time, and he wasn't the sharpest tool, knife in the box or the drawer or whatever, and so I had gotten tickets to see the Northern Irish football team to play the Faroe Islands, right? And so I said to my friend, "Do you want to take a plane with me to go to the Faroe Islands?" And he said, which, if you don't know, for the Faroe Islands is actually north of the Scottish thing. It's like halfway between Scotland and Iceland is the Faroe Islands, Faroe. But he basically said I didn't have the kit to go to the weather that was that hot because he thought that the Faroe Islands was in Egypt. So there you go. There you go. That was
brilliant.
Definitely.
Nikki, have you got a topic you want to talk about next week?
Not for next week. I'm looking into a few things.
Well,
so I do have an update.
Yeah.
Go on then.
So you know how we did the show on McCamey Manor, and everybody's like, "Wow, Nikki, you're dark." Blah blah blah. I do have good news.
You
So
petty bastard.
I I got a picture of Russ McCamey working at Walmart, so I was very ecstatic to see that, he's probably not doing his haunt anymore
Although,
because he
well,
had to go get a job.
yeah. Well, that's okay. I could imagine that working at Walmart at times could be a horror show in itself.
Yeah, there was much celebrating of all of us who've been trying to shut him down when we saw it. We were like, "Ha ha!"
Well, yeah. Well, we could talk about elements of Egyptian history and things like that. I mean, there are funny bits about it. I mean, we could talk about sort of the idea of, if you want, the idea that uh, uh, Tutankhamun, his dad tried to start a monotheistic religion, and a lot of people think that's because he was an alien. There's some stuff to do with that. Like the whole rise and fall of the monotheistic religion that happened under Amun Ra, and how people have come up with the ancient alien theory about that. I mean, we could talk about
We
that.
could talk about that. The fact that one of the greatest pharaohs of Egypt was actually a woman, and not Cleopatra, the other one.
Yeah,
Because of N.
Nefertiti.
No.
No, it wasn't Nefertiti, but I know who you're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah, she was a legend.
and she wore the ceremonial beard and everything like that. So she had a strap-on beard. And,
Nice. All right. Yeah. Okay. We'll talk about Egyptian culture next week then.
yeah, and I mean
That
it's a
sounds
long,
good.
it's a long.
And I found the perfect soundbite to make you shut up next week if you talk too much. Feel like I'm being
Hey,
mean
listen.
here.
I will say, hey, listen. Nikki had said, she didn't want to talk a lot this week, and I kind of compensate for that. I abhor a vacuum.
Mhm.
I get I hate dead air, and so therefore I will fill it if nobody else does. So,
Here we go. This is for next week.
Will you shut up? Will you please shut up? Will you shut up? Shut up! Shut up!
Such a dick.
no, I understand. I
love that scene as well. It's so good.
Yeah. Well,
Afterwards, when he's like, "I'm putting you on my list of enemies, Tony."
well, there's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than a little bit of that. That's all I was saying.
See,
And
we could do
hopefully,
that for a show. We could just watch an episode of Father Ted and just commentate on it.
well, yeah. I mean, I mean, it would be interesting. You would create a level of depth for a lot of people that they don't necessarily. I mean, Richard, you've spent time in Ireland, in the west of Ireland, where Craigie Island would be. I mean, there's a lot of sort of bits of Irish culture that I think are lost in that, but it is interesting. But all I'm trying to do is, I mean, if people have talked about Jack the Ripper before, anybody can talk about it from the standpoint of, turn on the History Channel, you can get a Jack the Ripper thing that says all these different crap, but I was trying to go a little bit deeper for somebody who maybe had not, seen just the average thing, that's all.
That's it. That's right, Gabby. That's who I meant. So awesome. They made all the statues to look like men. eventually murdered by her own brother's son.
So who was it? Nefertari?
Hatshepsut.
Oh, Hatshepsut. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
She was a legend. She was really good. Yeah, we'll talk about that stuff next week. Egyptian culture. And
why
Wow.
the aliens built the pyramids.
and why aliens beat the pyramids. And they definitely did, and we have evidence. So tune in next week.
Well, they point to the stars.
Spoiler alert, there is no evidence.
And listen, but you know what is funny? Everything points to the stars. If you think about it.
That's true. If you think about Earth in three-dimensional space, but despite the flat earthers' best hopes, no matter
Wait,
where you point,
the Earth
you're
isn't
pointing
flat?
at No, of course not. It's a hexagon.
Oh. Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense. Thanks for clearing that up for me.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Well, that's yet to be proven.
Unfortunately, since I updated the my Windows, I lost Mumbles. I'm gonna have to ask Phil where he got it from so I can get it back. But
Or we could just, completely do something different. I mean,
we could.
I don't know. Ask the chat. What do they think? Should we do a whole new intro and exit for
We're doing a new intro. I just want to get a few shows under our belt so I can have some sound bites.
Well, apparently you've got enough sound bites of me.
I was just giving you some shit, Kevin. Don't take it personally.
No, people don't realize that after the show's over, it's going to be an hour of me apologizing to Richard. I didn't think I was. I wasn't. If anything, people know is I am quite neurotic at the foot of the all-powerful English man, and Niki knows that. Niki knows that after the show, I get really sort of neurotic.
10 minutes of apologizing, then 70 minutes of eugenics.
Yes, I do apologize, and then bring it into current genetic theory and how we should breed out people like me. Because eugenics didn't take into effect that Irish people in eugenics would not go along, obviously, because we're subhuman Cro-Magnon types. If you want to know what happened to Neanderthals, go to Ireland. Apparently, this was a very common idea This was a very common idea in the 1800s that Irish people were subhumans. I mean, look it up. You can Google subhuman Irish people, and you can find the picture of the Norman Saxons and the Hibernian people, and they will basically tell you that Irish folks are basically one step up from caveman and not fully formed human beings.
Well, that's what makes them so fun now, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I guess. I like it because it makes us super strong and we can drink a lot. And the only thing that we've got going for us is our accents, which is how we try to take over the world by having sex with white women.
That's right.
Yes. And we're going
that's what counts too.
Yes. Because a lot of people don't think, even though we are the whitest group of people on the planet, we were not considered to be white for a long time. So there you go. Thanks, Richard.
Right. Brilliant. Okay. There's a happy note to end the show on. We will return next week, despite the hopes of many. It's good night.
Hide your wife. Hide your children.
I'm coming with my accent, darling. You're dead set.
That was like
Scottish. You want my sex?
Yeah. What? Oh dear God. That's in my head now.
There you go. There's one for you.
I thought this is it. This is the low point when you were talking about eugenically wiping out the Irish race, but no, it
No,
got worse.
not wiping out the Irish race. You know, basically bringing you into, down to my level. You know,
He wants you to have his babies.
you're the superior English person. I'm not. I understand that. So you've got stuff. You and the Germans, and I can tell you, when I was stationed in Germany, I tried to breed the Germans out as much as I possibly.
Dear God, Jesus, take the wheel.
That's all a joke.
And on
That's
that bombshell,
that's
we're going to end the show.
Just end it all. End it all.
We're just going to end it
We're
with
just gonna end
Kevin
it all.
breeding with all the German women. That's a good note to end the show on. Good night, everyone. Just
Good
go
night,
Sox.